What is up, everyone? JD here. I hope you're doing well today. Today we're going to be doing the full review of the Brian Brown Yeager M V2. Let's get into it. All right, guys, so what we're going to be doing today is we're going to do our size comparisons, check the weight on this one out, and then we'll jump into my thoughts and impressions. Let's kick it off with a couple of budget knives. First, we're going to bring out the Yeager Moriarl, which is going to be very comparable, medium-sized EDC for me, and we're going to bring out the Civivi Ball Tusk. So the ball tusk, as you can see, is a little bit bigger, more full-sized overall, and the Moriarl more in line, honestly, with that size. Let's go ahead and move the ball tusk out of the way. Man, that one's good. If you haven't checked that one out or seen a review on it, check that review out. Here it is against the Spyderco Shaman. So again, more medium-sized, not small, just more medium-sized. And here it is against the Spyderco Para 3. And again, it's a little bit bigger, which is why I'm constituting it as more medium-sized. Let's go ahead and check the profile out against these two knives just to see how it'll feel in hand and how it's going to carry in pocket compared to these, in case you're more familiar with these two knives. So you can see that the Yeager M is a little bit more thick than the Para 3, and then the Moriarl, I believe, was the one that was more comparable in size to it. And as you can see, these two are pretty much identical in thickness. Very, very comparable knives. What about the weight? Let's grab the scale, bring that out here next. And this one is coming in at 4.5 ounces. I guess it changed its mind there at the last second. Went down from 4.6 to 4.5. So a nice weight for a medium-sized all-titanium EDC. All right, let me go ahead and jump into my thoughts and impressions of the Yeager M. First, we're going to talk about ergos. I did intentionally go for the non-flipper variant here. For me, it is a full four-finger grip if I don't get the flipper version. Now, we'll say the flipper version is a very low profile flipper. My buddy Javier lent me his. I got to check out the V2 way back, and I was able to comfortably get over the flipper. You could feel it was there, but it wasn't like a horrible hot spot. It was just a little sharp around there. And I will upload the cut test later where I went through and did the cut test with this one, but it was very comfortable in hand. I felt a little bit of the pocket clip right here. It's very, very close to coming to the edge, but it doesn't quite get there. So what you end up with is it's kind of hitting right there on the palm. Not too bad. Let me turn this light up a little bit for you guys so you can see a little bit better. I'm hoping that extra lighting will help there for you, but what it's doing, it's kind of hitting right there. So nothing super uncomfortable. You can feel it's elevated or raised above the rest of the handle, but very comfortable ergonomically through the push cuts and the detail work that I was doing specifically. For the pinch grip, it's really nice. I find that my middle finger lands here on the flat spot, and I meet my thumb there with it, and I'm able to really get that perfect grip for me personally to be able to do the draw cuts and utility cuts that I like doing with that one. And in that choked up spot, I can get really far out on the middle of the blade and push through anything that I need to cut that I want to have that level of detail to. The pocket clip works really well. In my jeans, it works well. The cargo or khakis, it does fine. And then when I'm in my sweats and basketball shorts, it does kind of have a lot of tension, so it's kind of bunching the material, so you feel it skip a little bit on the way out, but that is not very strong material. It's very loose, so that's kind of what's going on with that. But I do like the fact that my particular variant, the inlay, covers up the relief cut, so I'm not binding up at all with that, but it does look like it would clear because the relief cut is way back here, so I do like that. In the unboxing, I tested this. I'm not going to continue to spine whack it, but it passed with flying colors. It looks like it's between 20 and 30% lockup. The lockup engagement, while it doesn't look like it has a ton of clearance because they're both even here, there's not one that's above the other. Due to the thickness of this particular knife, I'm able to actually get in there pretty easy for it to drop. So I do like the lock bar access. I love that it's locked up solid with no issues whatsoever. And then the opening hole really is good for that crispy opening. The reverse flick is very satisfying with this one. I do not have the flipper, so I don't have that means of deployment, but I'm able, because of the way that it has this really generous relief cut here for access to the thumb hole, the opening hole, it's really quite easy to deploy this with that opening hole, so I do like that a lot. Let's talk about the blade. This thing has a very tall hollow grind on it, and my version has the belt satin instead of the hand rubbed, and I think that looks really, really good. It went through the material very nicely, super thin behind the edge. The M390 held up well. Again, it's a moderate cutting test that I do. I'm more interested in, does it perform well through what would be a decent volume of cutting, and also does it feel comfortable? So it's a little bit of a balance. I'm not here to do a hyper edge retention test, just what I think normal use would look like. It is heavy because it's condensed into a video, but it would be like breaking down like 10, 15 boxes in my opinion, and cutting some other materials in between testing it from the start and the end. And the only thing that I found was there was like a little tiny blemish right here. So when I was going back through the paper, it kind of got snagged there. But if I started the paper cut past that little blemish and went through the rest of the blade, it felt just as sharp as it did at the beginning. And after stropping like five to eight strops, it was really good. But again, we'll get into that with the cut test. The action on here is really good. It did take a little bit for me to dial this in. If I'm being completely honest, I don't know that it is a big upgrade over the factory bearings. I immediately broke it apart, flipped the washers, and put skiffs in here. I would say at the very least the action's identical and the pivot is very solid. I have not had their new pivot system back out on me. It has stayed locked up solid. So I really do appreciate and enjoy that part of it, because in the disassembly, I did talk about the tooling was off on this particular knife. And you know what? I forgot to grab my T15. I'll jump ahead to when I pull that out 1 second. I do leave my T8 in here because that's what I find that everything pretty much uses. But this one here is a T15. And hopefully I can get to show on screen. This is a brand new T15 bit. Hopefully you're seeing that okay. The tooling on here is not done right. And I know that I've talked to Brian, and he indicated that he was going to talk with Reate about the tooling on here. But you can see, I'm not going to push hard, but you can see as I go to move it, you see how it rotates out very easily. Now, if you take that T8 and put that same amount of pressure on these probably like purchased and imported bolts here, you can see it doesn't want to jump out like the T15. So he's having a conversation with them. He thinks something changed in production, because if you look, it doesn't appear like it'd be shallow. So I think the tooling in between the stars on the Torx bit is rounded, has gotten rounded into some kind of way, shape, and form. I'm hoping Reate will offer to replace any of these that are not right, because what's going to happen is people are going to try to tighten it and push in, and it's going to start scratching your titanium and your inlays if you have them. So that is a major concern for me, especially because I do like to do the maintenance myself. I like to periodically at points in time break the knife down and take them apart. The pivot system itself, I was a little nervous about, because it's basically like one giant milled pivot. So the entire piece is one piece except for the titanium captive part that is on the show side. This goes through and screws into that, and it works just fine. Once you insert this all the way, you can take this flat piece of titanium here, you can push so that the pivot comes out, and because everything is spec'd well, it lines up and tightens up just fine. No issues at all with that. It goes back together nicely. And I like the system overall because it keeps the screw from backing out. I think the big thing is just fix the tooling. I know that might seem like a nitpick, but to me, that is a major concern for maintenance. If people want to put skiffs on their knives, whatever it is that they want to do the maintenance, they shouldn't have to worry about always putting a fresh bit in here, going slow, worrying about it jumping. At this price point, that should be perfect, in my opinion. As far as the way that this is designed, on the lock bar side, the way that the pocket clip sits on top of the scale here, it keeps and pinches that down with the pivot. And then on the show side, it has the bolt lined up here with this particular screw, and the pivot and this screw are what keep the inlay nested in there and not, keep it from falling out. I've heard people kind of talk about it looks odd to have that bolt there. They think it would look cleaner without it. I don't think it would. I don't think it looks that bad. I think if you just had it either, I think Lefty is the one that pointed out, like maybe if you moved it over here and it looked like it was a triangle, it'd be a little bit more balanced. You could just go with the one bolt to put it together. Since you already have these bolts here, maybe you could design it in a way where it is, trying to think, like if you could have the second one going through. Nah, because then it would be in the blade path, and the first one would be in the blade path as well. Not really sure that there's a way that you could put it together to where it, just threaded through without some sort of system. Because I feel like with just this one gone, I think those two line up better, and I think it looks cleaner. I don't know if there's enough room on the backspacer to move it in and hide it in the inlay. It doesn't bother me that much, I guess is what I should wrap up with saying. For me, it doesn't really bother me too much. If you wanted to move the screw back a little bit so that it was in the middle and looked like a triangle, that would be fine. That's not that big of an issue for me. Also, I've had people tell me that they had an issue with getting it centered. I have not experienced that. Hold on, let me make sure that I'm looking at it dead on. I'm trying to make sure that I don't look past. I can't see either side elevated there. For me personally, I feel like it's centered. I don't feel like it's off either way. And then the grinds out towards the top here. If there's any variation from that hand grind, I'm not really seeing it at where the scales stop and the blade is exposed. Like, I'm not really noticing that. So it looks dead center to me. But I did have someone ask me if I noticed that the grinds were off. So I did check it. It's a little off. And I think I mentioned this because at this price point, it could be a deal breaker. You might be looking for perfection on this, but it's hand ground like a custom. So, I mean, that's going to be on you to decide how you feel about that. But I'll point out what I'm talking about here. So this one here, the grind line stops about a quarter of the way up. You can barely see any of the grind sticking up. On the opposite side, you can see it's about halfway up, and you can see way more reflectivity from the grind there. It's about halfway up the thumb hole, versus on this side, it sits a lot lower. So just some little things that I noticed that don't really bother me, I guess. I really do like this. I think the overall build quality is really good. My main thing is I want a replacement pivot. I don't feel like this pivot was done correctly. Brian has said that they believe that there was something changed during the production and they're talking to Reate about it, but I think Reate really needs to own up to the mistake and provide pivots for everyone out there that reaches out about their pivot. If you use a T15, you go slow and take your time, it shouldn't be an issue, but if you are, definitely reach out. I think it's something that they should take care of, for me personally. Alternative recommendations. Again, this is not a cheap piece, so something that you want to take a look at if you're looking at this price point that I personally really like. I know it's a very different style, but it is going to be the We Knife Orpheus. I like this one because you have the inlay, you have a hand rub satin finish on 20CV versus M390, very similar blade steel. You have very thin geometry. It's a nice slicer. You have a little bit, you don't have any labeling here in the pivot, which I like. You have the We logo hidden into the pocket clip, which I think is really well done. You have an integral frame lock knife with micro milling. Good attention to detail here. I like that. It is an onlay lock bar insert. It sits on the top with this particular design. That's how you can get it out of there to do any type of maintenance. A little bit of oil leaking out here on the pivot. I need to take that out and dry it out, but it's really integrated nicely. You can vaguely, barely feel the transition there, but that's so you can get the stop pin out. Check my disassembly of this out. It's really cool. You got lightning anno. They did a good job on the collar, just a touch of that. So at that same price point, this is an alternative that you could do where you would get an integral piece, but it is a very different look, which I do understand. Roughly nearly $200 less, you could go for the Quiet Carry 9 magnet cut steel. They do come in and out of stock. You have an inlay. You have a very good design here with knurling on both sides, micro milling, which is really hard to get it to show on camera. One of the best pocket clips you'll ever encounter. The way this is designed, it's deep carry, goes in and out of the pocket perfectly, and it's 3-screw construction with really good access and good blade geometry and very good construction. That's just a couple of alternative recommendations. Again, if you are on a budget, and I do understand this is not in everybody's wheelhouse. The reason I did bring the Moyarl out here is because you do get something that is about the same size. You're going to get good cutting performance. The geometry on these are similar. I would say the one on the Yeager is probably a touch thicker just looking at it to the naked eye. I mean, it looks obviously thicker, I think, but hopefully you're able to kind of tell that. So you get good geometry. Also no flipper here. This is thumb hole only, good detent, nice action for the money. You're going to get a really good working knife where you're able to choke up just like you are on the Yeager. So for my budget folks out there, I think that is a really cool option there. If they ever did one of these in like a sheep's foot, I think that would be like the perfect competitor for a very budget oriented type knife. I did see Knife Dope out there mentioned that he felt like the Native 5 was a really good alternative recommendation because they felt very similar both in size and like ergonomically in hand, very, very comfortable. Overall, I like it. I think my biggest thing is I would like the pivot replaced with the correct tooling done on that one. And then for everything else, I really don't care about the screw in particular being in that particular spot. And then because it is finished by hand, I actually kind of like that it's a little different on either side. It makes it feel like a custom to me. Let me know what your thoughts are on the Yeager M. Do you like it? Don't you like it? Do you have a version 2? Do you have a version 3? And talk to me a little bit about some of the differences. Make sure you leave those comments down below. Shout out to everyone out there that likes, uses the links, comments, and is subscribed. Love you guys. I hope you have a fantastic week. Until next time, peace.